Welcome to the free GRE Prep Hour. As always, we have Manhattan Prep instructors who are here to tell you about different aspects about the GRE, things to help you frame your study process or to think about the test in a new way. So welcome. I'm excited that you're all here and excited to get started. So just a brief little plug, all of the problems that we do are written by Manhattan Prep instructors, and most of them can be found right here in the 5-pound book of GRE Practice Problems. So as you're prepping, if you want a lot of content to practice with, this is really where you should start. So here's what we're going to be covering tonight. We're going to be looking at the quant side, how to approach the quant section well, but specifically looking at discrete quant. Those questions that are either multiple choice or fill in the blank or choose all that apply. And I've got this strategy that could help you look at them in a new way, but we'll get to all of that in just a moment. For now, I actually want you guys to dive in, and I'm going to make you work on a problem. So what we'll do, I'll put up a timer. I'll give you 2.5 minutes. I'll be nice, a little extra time, more than you might get on the real thing, to work on this problem. And then when you have an answer, you will see right now I'm changing the polling button to A through D multiple choice. So you'll see a little letter A in that participants window. So click on an answer when you have one. Go for it. All right, I want everyone to pull in an answer. Should have turned that pencil tool off. Some folks were writing on the board here rather than pulling in. But use that little A button that you see in the participants window right above my name. You should see a lowercase letter A. If you click on that, it'll allow you to select A, B, C, D, or E here. And if you don't have an answer yet, that's all right. But I want to talk about something before we talk about this problem, actually. Here's what I want to know. At what point did you start writing things down? So looking down at your scrap paper, if you have scrap paper in front of you, when did you start writing things? That's what I want to know. So tell me in the chat window. Hang on, my writing tool is frozen here. When did you start writing things down? 5 seconds in, 10 seconds, 30 seconds into the problem, almost immediately. Here, I'll open up the chat window so you can just type in the main room chat, tell the group, when did you start writing things down? Taking notes as you read, about 8 seconds in, 5 seconds, right away, 5 seconds. All right, so this is what a lot of people do. They start writing as soon as they see the problem. But here's my question to you. If we go back to here, and if we start reading, and we say, container A is a third full of water, container B twice the capacity, and you're grabbing your pen and you're saying, A, 1/3, B, twice the capacity, B, 2A, something like that, I mean, I've got stuff written down, but what am I solving for? At this point in the problem, I've got some notes written down, but do I know what I'm solving for here? This is not a great strategy. Even though it might feel like we're being productive, it feels like, you know, taking notes while we're doing reading comp or something like that. It's actually not very productive to write while you're reading on the quant section. So despite what your high school teachers may have told you, this is a bad way to approach discrete quant on the GRE. So here's what you should do instead. Read the entire problem. Think about what it's asking. Think about kind of the story of this problem. See if you can picture it. See if anything stands out as being tricky or surprising. And then there are actually 3 more things that I want you to do before you pick up the pen. I promise if you do these things before you start writing things down, your accuracy will improve on discrete quant. You guys tell me, what do you think that expert GRE test takers do that you might not be doing yet at this point? What might they do before picking up the pen? Ooh, Matt, I like that. Think about what type of problem it is. Yes, Jackson, think about exactly what it's asking for. Understand the situation. Rena, I think that can be a good point with things like the data interpretation questions, but on a standard discrete quant, just multiple choice question, you're not going to get a lot of things that are irrelevant. It is pretty much the case that you need almost everything they give you. What's something else that nobody has talked about yet? If the audio sounds fuzzy, one thing that you could do is try lowering your connection speed. If you go to Preferences, Connection, lower your connection speed and that might help. Yes, yes, scan the answers. You know how back in high school your teacher, or at least my teachers in high school would always say, show all your work. And you have to show all of your steps before you pick the answer. You don't get the full point. But that's not how the GRE works. A right answer is a right answer. It doesn't matter how you got there. So I want you guys to start, as you're approaching this, this test, treat these answer choices as part of the problem itself. So here are our steps. We read the entire problem. We then identify the question. And this will become relevant in a moment, but thinking about the type of question that it's asking for can actually change our strategy. There are certain things that we can do when it's asking for a value. There are certain things that we can do when it's asking for a proportion. And we want to be careful not to answer the wrong question. So read it and then really tag the question. And then to Tom's point, scan the answers and use common sense. So I want you guys, don't type it in the chat yet, but think about it on this problem. Are there answer choices that you could have gotten rid of? If you've thought of one, tell us in the main chat. Do any of these answer choices not make sense, or is there anything that we should get rid of here? Ooh, Sarah and Travis, D and E. Tell me why. Why do you guys say that D and E should be out? Right, they're greater than 1. So why wouldn't that work? Why does that not make sense here? It's not the fact that they're an improper fraction, because sometimes we might have right answers that are improper fractions. Like, imagine if it was, you know, I had a certain amount of money last year, and then this year I have 13/12 of the amount that I had last year. Think about what this question is asking us for. Yeah, it's the capacity of water. Think about the overflow. Can you fill water to more than the capacity of the cup? Can you go pour me 13/12 of a cup of water? It's not going to work. If that ended up being the answer, the question wouldn't make sense. You wouldn't describe B as being filled to 13/12 of its capacity. You would say, B is full, and there's a puddle of water on the floor. The question doesn't make any sense. So the GRE trusts that the GRE will abide by real-life common sense. It takes place in the physical world. It's not going to be illogical in that way. The D and E are out. So we eliminate anything that seems illogical. Then we could think about this idea of, do we see any clues or patterns or pairs? So I'll tell you what I know. When I'm looking through answer choices, I'll just flag things to myself like, okay, I see a couple denominators of 12, a couple denominators of 6, a couple of numerators of 11. I don't know if that means anything, but at least I notice those commonalities. It means that probably B is an outlier. Different numerator, different denominator than the others. That doesn't make it wrong. That just means if I were guessing, maybe it's not what I would guess. And then comes this crucial part. Step 4. There's one more step. Before you put pen to paper, does anyone want to tell me one more thing that we should think about or that we should do before solving? Or maybe the way to ask you guys the question is this. How did you solve this? Did you use algebra? Did you just think about the fractions? Did you draw a picture? What did you do to solve? Don't tell me what answer you got, but just tell me how you got there. Fake numbers. That's really interesting. Visualizing a third and then halving it. Okay, I like that a lot. Yeah, visual, map it out, kind of use logic. I think that's all really great. So what I want you guys to do before you dive in and start solving is weigh your options. You're going to find that in the GRE official guide or in any of the books that you read, it might say things like, here's how to translate the algebra. And it kind of makes us think that algebra is the only way to do it, the only way to get there. But in fact, there are often lots of different ways that we could have gotten there, and we want to think about the most efficient way to solve it. So I want to come back to AE, I don't know your real name there, being very secretive and anonymous there. You said you picked fake numbers. What numbers did you pick? So you just kind of said, okay, let me assign something for A and something else for B. Just pick anything I want. Back showing on the last slide. Oh, back solving. So yeah, we'll talk to that. I'll come back to that, I promise. From here, okay, you said you made A 3. 3 what? 3 gallons, 3 liters, 3 ounces, 3 tablespoons? I'm just kidding, it doesn't matter. We don't have to use units. It doesn't matter in the context of this problem, right? This problem would be the same whether we're talking about teeny tiny teaspoons or if we're talking about thousands of gallons or liters or whatever. Units don't matter. And whenever that's the case, whenever it doesn't matter what the actual amounts are, we could just assign our own amounts. You might call it picking fake numbers. I like to call it picking smart numbers. Because, I mean, fake, they're not pretending, it's just, it could be anything you want, so why not 3? So, if we pick 3 for A, let's see what happens. A is 1/3 full, so if it's 3, let's just say liters in A, and A is 1/3 full, how many liters do we have in container A? Anyone? Yeah, we got 1. All right, now, what's the total capacity of container B? If container A is 3, container B would be twice the capacity, so 6. We got that 3/4 full. So how much water is in container B? 3/4 of 6. Ugh. Yeah, that gets a little messy. I mean, 4.5, okay, that's not the worst thing in the world, but basically the idea of picking smart numbers is to make life easier. And one concrete way to make life easier on problems like this is make it all integers. The human brain is just going to work much, much better in integers than in fractions or decimals or anything else. So I like this idea, but for me, when I hit a situation like this where I'm about to use 4.5, I say to myself, you know what? Nope, I'm going to go back to the drawing board and actually just pick a different set of numbers here just to make my life much easier. So what could I pick instead of 3 and 6 that would automatically make life easy? Yeah, if we go 6 and 12, 6 we can divide by thirds, 12 we can divide by fourths, so that's going to be nice and easy. Or we could have done 12 and 24. It really didn't matter. We were finding a common denominator of these two. So now, A's got 1/3 of 6. We've got 2 liters in there. How much do we have in B? If B is 3/4 full, huh, 1/4 of 12 would be 3. So then 3/4 would be 9 precisely. And then when we pour what we have from container A into container B, add another 2. 2 plus 9 gives us 11 liters. And then container B will be close to a fraction of its capacity, so that's 11 out of 12. So there we go. Answer was C. Now, because you got to that answer, you may have gotten there a totally different way, and that is fine. I'm not here to say that there is a right way and a wrong way to solve. But I do think that there's a right way and a wrong way to approach problems, which is step back, think about it first, and really weigh your options first. I think doing algebra would have been fine here. For those of you who just kind of visualized it and said, well, 1/3 of something that's twice the size is 1/6 relatively, and you can just kind of logic it out that way, that's totally fine. Exactly. Precisely, Natasha. So what I want to do is I want to see if we can extrapolate a rule here. What was it about this problem that told us that we could pick our own numbers? Why was that a legal move? Exactly. So this is a rule that you can use pretty much anywhere on GRE Discrete Quant. You can pick your own smart numbers if you have all proportions with no actual values. And here's what I mean by proportions. Could be fractions, could be percent, could be ratios, but as long as we're not given actual values. And yeah, just comparative, as Max said. Never specifies how big they actually are. So you guys are all saying the same thing in different ways, not given real numbers. There's another situation. Does anyone know the other situation where if we were given, how do I say this? There's another time, not necessarily proportion questions, there's another time on the GRE where we're not given all actual values and we might be able to pick our own particular question structure that has particular looking answer choices. Some feature about answer choices is a signal that we can pick our own. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Variables in the answer choices. Exactly. So here, we're given, actually, proportions. 4 times as old as is a proportion. In X years, 3 times as old as. And then here's a big clue. If you see the question structured in terms of X, and then you see all X's in those answer choices, X, etc., that is a clue that it might be easier to pick your own. I mean, it might be perfectly easy to just do the math algebraically. I'm not saying that you should pick numbers, but you can. Questions on that idea? See some folks typing. No? All right. Well, let's try another one. I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes on this, and I want you to think about that idea of whether you could pick your own. Go for it. With 15 more seconds to put an answer up. All right, let's take a look. So here, does this fit the rules that we had before? All proportions, no real values. Yeah, it totally does. 50%, 20%, 30%. That seems like exactly what we're talking about here. All proportions, no real values. His income could have been $2, it could have been $2 million, and this all would be the same. Now, before we start working on that though, we said the rule is we want to read it, we want to think about it first. Here's something that I want you guys to think about. I want you to tell me one thing that we should really always have in the back of our minds is this idea that the GRE test writer is trying to trick us. So how are they trying to trick us? What do you think the trap answer would be in this case? And oops, let me turn the chat back on so that everyone can type into the main chat. The trap, yeah, I think that the one big trap would be missing this idea of 30% of the remainder and just saying 50%, 20%, 30%, that's everything, right? So 0% is left, you've done everything. That's not going to be it, right? So what you want to do is read carefully, first of all. But then the other thing that I think is a good rule of thumb is that there's no such thing as what I would call a one-move answer. So if all you did was 50 minus 30 minus 20, or, you know, like really 50 plus 30 plus 20 equals 100% total, so that's everything, well, that's not going to be it, right? So make sure if you ever find yourself getting to an answer that you think like a 7th grader would have gotten to really easily, that's not going to be it. There's something more complicated going on. If you want to break down rent, utilities, insurance, food, and then 30% of the remainder on video games. What percent of his income is left after all those expenditures? So if we were going to pick numbers, what should we pick here? We're picking numbers for a percent problem. I don't know why the chat keeps reverting to not letting you type in the chat. That should let you type in the chat now. That was weird though. I like that commentary. $100, which would be a terrible income, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be realistic. If it's a percent problem, pick 100 or multiples thereof. If it was like, you know, if we're breaking something down into groups and then taking percents, we might want to pick 100 for the smallest group and then have the larger one be 1,000 or something like that. So if his total income is 100, we can break this down pretty easily. Rent, utilities, insurance, that's 50% of that total, so that makes life easy. That is 50. Then food, going to be 20. So when we're looking at of the remainder, what was our remainder? There it is. And notice kind of a trick that they're setting there as well. 30% of 30, they're kind of messing with us a little bit. So how much did he spend on video games and other expenditures? All right, 9. Okay, so the answer is D, right? So here's where that idea of reading carefully and making sure that we've tagged the question is so important, because it's what percent of the income is left after all of those expenses, not what you spend on video games. First of all, that is a huge, huge proportion of your income to be spending on video games. Don't spend that much on video games, that's a lot. Better things to spend money on, right? So what's the question we really want to answer? Only $9, but if you're only making 100. Julia's got it exactly right. We take that 30 remaining, we subtract the 9, and in fact, the correct answer here was 21. So basically, you can trust that the GRE is going to set traps for you. You can kind of predict the traps that they're going to set, right? So taking the time to take a deep breath, step back, be really savvy about it can help you to avoid those traps. Because the math isn't hard. You get a calculator, which is nice. You don't even have to do 30% of 30 in your head. But if you are going too quickly, jotting things down as you go, there's a much bigger chance that on a problem like this, you would miss those little twists and end up answering the wrong question. So I want us to do an exercise. I don't want you to touch pen to paper. I don't want you to actually solve. I just want us to look at a couple of questions and see if we could pick smart numbers. And these are all questions from the 5-pound guide. So take a moment, read these two. Don't type anything into the chat window yet. Just read through them, no calculations. Just think about whether you could pick numbers or not. All right, tell me what you guys think about this first one. Could we pick our own smart numbers, yes or no? Yeah, we can totally pick, but this is our heading here, can we pick? Yes, because all we have here, we got a 4th and a 6th and nothing concrete, so we can do this as a fraction. What would be a good thing to pick here? Yeah, pick 24 or some multiple of 4 and 6. All right, second one, what do you guys think? Can we pick our own numbers? This one's actually kind of funny. I mean, sort of yes, sort of no. If you think about this as in 16, kind of, but actually in 16 pieces, that's a concrete number. And then one of those pieces split among 3 people. They're giving us some concrete to work with, so we can't just decide, oh, there are 48 pieces or something like that, right? So no, we've got real numbers given. All right, let's try another set. Think about whether you could pick or not. All right, ooh, we have something that we haven't seen. Well, we actually saw one example of that before, but we haven't really talked about. Here, we've got a numeric entry. Ugh. Honestly, between you and me, I hate numeric entry because it doesn't really allow us much flexibility in the strategies that we can apply. It doesn't let us use that step 3 of look at the answer choices, think about them, use common sense, look for patterns. It gives us nothing to go on. If it's numeric entry, we just have to do the work, figure out the answer. But in doing that work, do we have to do algebra or could we pick numbers here? We might be able to pick numbers. 75% of boys, 48% of the girls. So let's actually do these one by one, because I think that these are worth discussing. So normally you say, all right, if it's a percent problem, let's pick total number of students is 100. Daniela was anticipating what I was about to say here. Yeah, and Littlefield's great point there too, nested percentages. I like that way of phrasing it. We can't just declare a total because we're specifying boys and girls. Actually, fun fact, the GRE very recently has declared that they are not going to use any gender binary questions on the real test anymore. So they've recently edited their book to get rid of all boys and girls references and turn juniors and seniors or something like that. So, so we're going to edit the Manhattan Prep Guide soon as well, but the version of the 5-10 guide that exists now still has some boys and girls, men and women problems. So just a funny fact there. But assuming, for the sake of this problem, that gender is binary, which we don't assume in real life, but boys and girls, 75% of the boys, 48% of the girls. Well, we don't really know what percent of the total that is yet. So, what's a better way to pick? We probably don't want to start by picking for the total. Does anyone have a better option for me? Pick the girls. Why pick the girls and not the boys? Ooh, because we got 20% fewer boys than there are girls. If that's the case, when we're dealing with percent change, so if we have a percent less than or a percent more than, we know that this is defined as the difference over the original. Now that's kind of easy if we think about years, going like if there's my stock grew 10% from last year to this year. Clearly last year is original, and then this year is the change. But when we're talking about boys and girls, but which one's original, that's hard to say. So the structure of the sentence will tell us the original is the one after the word than. So boys are 20% less than girls. Use girls as your original and boys as your 20% change. Some of you might intuit that already, but I think that is helpful to kind of use that as a rule. So let's say that we had 100 girls and then we've got 80 boys. And now we can take those percentages of that. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions on that idea? There is not quite sure. So by that, what I mean is, if I'm saying, here's a question that I was just doing with a student earlier. We'll come back to this in just a moment, but just put this on the page. If it was in January, revenue was 50 million, up 5% from last year. We wouldn't want to just say that 50 million and take a percent change of that. From last year, up 5% from last year was the wording, but up 5% from is another way of saying 5% more than last year. Let's use the rule that I specified, 5% more than last year. So we'd want to think about that as the difference over the original, where last year was the original amount. So we've got last year plus a 5% increase. Gets us to this year's amount. So how would we write that? If we were writing this as an equation, how would we write this one? I know we're off on a tangent, but we will come back to that previous problem. It'll feel exactly. So you could say 5% of X plus X, but that's more complicated than we want to be. Last year plus a 5% increase is the same as 105% of last year. So in other words, 1.05x equals 50, and we solve from there. So it really helps to know that the van is the thing that comes after the van is the one that we're taking that change from, not on any other that we have listed. Now this is in chronological order, so that might make that a little bit easier, but I still think this is kind of backwards from the way that we're used to doing it. We want to make sure that we're taking the right percent change. So here, fewer boys than girls. It means we want to start with the girls, take a 20% change, or in other words, 80% of. Yeah, absolutely. On this one, if you didn't want to do this as a decimal, if you wanted to write it as a fraction, you absolutely could write this as, 21/20th of x. That would be totally fine. Since you have a calculator on the GRE, you don't have to make yourself do simplified fractions if you prefer decimals. You get to just choose whichever way works better for you. So from here, we specify that girls are 100, boys are 80, and then we just do this work 75% of the boys. The GRE calculator is it has buttons on it that I truly don't know. I haven't seen on any calculator since the 1970s. I actually had to ask a colleague of mine who's in his 50s what those buttons stood for. Yes, you will be able to use the keypad, but it will be an on-screen calculator. There's like a memory recall and memory clear button. Here, if you guys haven't seen this, I can show you what it looks like. We have on our website a GRE calculator. So I'll take a screenshot of that for you. This is what the real thing is going to look like. And it looks like something made in Microsoft Paint. So it shouldn't make sense easy. But like memory recall and memory clear, I have never used those buttons in my life. The only thing I use the calculator for, multiplication, division, maybe if I have a bunch of steps to addition, but you shouldn't be relying on your calculator too much. Right. But NC clears the M plus, but I don't really know. Maybe I should use this, but actually my general rule is the rule that I want you guys to use. Use the calculator sparingly. This should never be your main tool on the quant. Logic and estimation is a better tool than the calculator. Daniel, I would say yes, it could, but there are problems. The last time I took it, and I usually take it about every year or two, the last time I took it, I certainly used the calculator, let's say on 4 or 5 questions out of 20 on each quant section. Sometimes it was just to double check what I'd done in my head. Sometimes it was, sometimes it might give you like 91 times 17. I don't really feel like doing that in my head. I could, but why do that if they have the calculator? But I don't want you using the calculator for things like 8 times 6, This problem, if I had picked 180 for girls and boys, I would use the calculator for the 75% and the 48%. Just because they don't necessarily, well, maybe not the 48% of girls. That one's easy. 48% of 100 is, without using a calculator, 48% of 100 is 48. But then 75% is 80. Okay, 3/4. That's not that hard. So actually, I lied. I wouldn't use a calculator on this one. 75%, 3/4 of 80 would be what? 60. But if those numbers had been reversed and I was taking 48% of 80, then I would use a calculator. So in terms of what you should memorize, I would say memorize conversions like decimal percent, fraction decimal percent conversions of quarters, fifths, thirds, eighths, I know what 1/6 is and 1/9, but other than that, I don't even know what 1/7 is off the top of my head. That's not one you should memorize. But things like 3/8 will come up enough that you probably want to know what that is as a percent. All right, so back to this question. We've got 48 girls, 60 boys in this civics class. So what percent of all students take civics? We've got 48 plus 60, that is 108. So that's our answer, right? Well, that should definitely fail the common sense test. So even though we can't follow our strategy of looking at the answer choices and using common sense, we definitely want to use a kind of like gut feeling. The number, if 75% of boys and 48% of girls took civics, the overall percentage of students who took civics have to be between 48 and 75, right? Couldn't be more than 75, couldn't be less than 48. So this number, 108%, should have definitely rung alarm bells. We're looking for 108 out of 180. And feel free to plug that into your calculator. 108 out of 180 would give us what as a percent? All right, 60. I said 60 and then I mistyped and typed 70, so that is something to be very, very careful of when it's numeric entry, because you have no way of double checking if you make a typo, so just go carefully, check that what's on your paper and what's on the screen are the same thing. That is a bad mistake to make. Questions on this one? Oh yeah, here, I'll just give you guys fraction, percent, conversions to memorize. So obviously all like 1/2 you should know, 1/3 and 2/3, 1/4, etc. So 2/4, 3/4, 1/5, etc. 1/6, it helps to know the approximate value of that, but you're not really going to need to worry about 5/6 and things like that. 1/8, etc., meaning 3/8, 5/8 are worth knowing. 1/9 you should know. 1/10, etc. You should know your tenths. 1/11 is good to just have as a kind of estimation reference point. And then things that are kind of multiples of the others, we have like 1/20th should be easy to get if you know 1/2 and 1/10. 1/50th, again, is an extension of 1/5 and 1/10. But those are really the only ones that you should feel responsible for off the top of your head. And actually, this is a great segue into what to do if you want more practice. Now, some of you might say, hey, I'm just here for this free hour. I'm studying on my own and it's going well, but I'm looking for extra pointers where I can get them. That's totally fine. I fully support that. But if you are thinking, I actually really want help digging into these things, there are 2 resources that I have for you. One is that awesome GRE 5-pound guide. And the other one, I want you guys to click this link that I'm putting in the chat window here. We have a brand new product that we have launched that we are so excited about. It is on-demand video lessons. It's adaptive, it's interactive. So you're not just passively sitting there and watching a video. When you answer a question right, it learns that and gives you more, maybe harder problems. If you get something wrong, it learns that and gives you more of those to practice with. So it's fully adaptive. And the cool thing is you don't need any books to go with this. The teachers are there with you. You can buy a 1-month package or you can buy a 6-month package. So that I consider that when you're thinking about how to prep for this. So Jackson, when we think about the test being adaptive, oh, so you mean Interact being adaptive? Yeah, I think starting with the basics, starting with the foundation, getting really comfortable with that before you add all the bells and whistles of harder problems is a good idea. And it guides you through that. So it'll really help you to figure out your range and what to work for. It'll customize based on how much time you have to prep. It'll give you different problems if you are doing a 1-month plan versus a 6-month plan. So we're really excited about it. We want you to try it out and tell us what you think. But we're also delighted if you just use our free resources. Our blog is also full of great advice on a wide range of problems. And we also would love to have your feedback if there are other things that you want. The other really cool thing is you can take any of our courses. You can take session number 1 of our 8-week course for free, in person or online. So if you've never taken a course before, just check that out. And let me give you the link to that blog. I write articles on the blog periodically, so there is a great check out my articles, they're fabulous. I didn't mean to say it like that. So Natasha, there isn't like live tutor chat with that, but you certainly can submit problems and get feedback. I can give you more information. Basically, if you go through that webpage, there's a lot more information. But if you have more specific questions, here is my email address. Feel free to email me with any questions that you have. I can forward them on to student services if you're interested in signing up. But if you have questions about just how it's structured or content or anything like that, do let me know. Yeah, any other questions? Well, it's been great working with you tonight. I hope that at the very least, one thing that you took away is just taking a deep breath before diving in, thinking about what it's really asking, and avoiding those traps. That is the key to doing well. So, thank you guys so much. Great to have you, and hope to see you again here soon.